what do we do with the challenge of Islam. And so I'm going to lay out for you guys immediately what some of my goals are for this class. Remember, last semester we talked about the issue of Islam, and how did we cover it when we covered it last semester? You remember how we covered it?
We talked about how it relates to other religions.
We looked at it in terms of worldview. And we pulled the chart off of summitministries.org. So if you want to see that chart, you can go to summitministries.org. And we compared Islam to the other dominant worldviews. What were some of the other worldviews we looked at in the fall? Who can name some of them? Secular humanism, postmodernism, Christianity, Marxism, Leninism, Cosmic humanism, which is more like New Age, and Islam. Okay, there were 6, so we got all 6 of them. We compared them with the 10 different disciplines like psychology and history and philosophy, and we looked to see how each of these different worldviews interact in our world today. So we clearly identified in our fall class when we were studying worldviews that Islam is a worldview. Now, when I say that, Danae, what does that mean to you when we say Islam is a worldview?
It's a way of life. It's not just a religion.
Okay, it's not just a religion, it's bigger than that. It's a way of thinking. Remember, we said a worldview is much like the issue of my glasses that I put on right now. When I have these glasses off, then, right now, with things over on that side of the room, Susan's sitting over there on that side of the room, and her face, I can see it, but I cannot see the features in her face very clearly. So I would make decisions, and I would interact with the world based on how I see things. Now, a worldview, every human being in the world will wear a worldview. And it's the lens by which we see, think, reason, and make decisions. So we clearly identified that there are 6, particularly in the Western world, 6 dominant worldviews. We didn't talk so much about the Eastern world and some of the other types of worldviews that are out there, but for the most part, you could take all the world and put them into those 6 different worldviews. Islam is one of those 6. Now, when you open the newscast up today, everybody's talking about Islam. But when people say Islam now, how do you think most people view Islam? What would they call it? A peaceful religion, okay? A peaceful religion. That's what everybody's saying now. Islam is a peaceful religion. Now, I have to say, I didn't pay you to say that, Micah, but that's exactly what question I want us to look at this week and next week. So this will be a 2-part teaching on the issue of Islam. I want us to be able to answer the question, is Islam a peaceful religion? But we know it is far more than a religion. So really, the question that's going on in the media that Islam is a peaceful religion is not even the whole question. What do you think I mean by that, Micah?
Well, the question is not necessarily based on what they do religiously, but what they do with human lives and what they do in their everyday life, and not just like acts of religion.
What they're doing inside the mosque versus what they're doing in the culture and the place where the culture is the place where we interact with humans. Okay? So there's an Islamic religion that might be being practiced inside a mosque, just like you could say there's a Christian religion that's being practiced inside a church or inside, I guess you could say even maybe a Roman Catholic church, or it would be very different than a Baptist church. But each of those are expressing the religious view of Christianity. But we can all look at that and say, well, that's kind of ridiculous to narrow everything about Christianity to say it's only the activity that goes on in a church service between 10 and 11 on Sunday morning. I mean, that's ridiculous. We know that there's more to it. And that's what I'm really concerned right now. When we look at what's going on in our news, when we look at the shifting going on in our world, we as believers need to get a handle on what Islam is and how we should build a biblical response to what some people would say the threat of Islam. The threat of Islam. Now, what do you feel threatened about? Just as a human being right now, that you're Christians and you've been learning biblical worldview. What do you think it means whenever people write the threat of Islam? What immediately comes to your mind when I say that?
Terrorism.
Okay, you think terrorism. Okay, what do you think? Terrorism? Okay, what do you think? Killing infidels. Okay, so immediately we're thinking violence. Okay, that's the threat of Islam. But I have to propose to you, that is not the only threat that we should be experiencing about Islam. Though that's the one that we predominantly think about, because Islam is a worldview. And where that worldview comes into an assimilation into the culture will shift. Do you believe that? Okay, so the threat of Islam is not just about whether we're going to have our heads cut off, though that is one of the issues that we're going to look at, but it's also the threat to the Western mind and the Western way of life that is represented in the worldview system of Islam. So here's what I want to do today. Today I want to lay some foundation and make sure we know all of the what I would call the basics of Islam. Last time we learned about some of those basics, but I want to make sure that we know a little deeper, because as I'm watching the news right now, if you don't have a good handle on some of these words, you're going to be confused as to what the news is even talking about. Now, last week I asked you to do some homework. Who remembers what your homework was to prepare for this class? Let's see if everybody got it done.
You're supposed to read an article
Yes.
about the Bible versus the Quran, and also read that handout you gave us, and then
Right.
also read the part of 7,000 Friday news.
Yes, you had 3 parts to your homework. Did everybody get their 3 parts done? You get them all done? Good. You can take note of that back there in the back. We got 3 parts done. We read the Project 7,000. Remember, I'm not requiring you to read every part of that, but you're reading the storylines. You're going to start to see how I lay that out, because in this class, you're going to begin to help me to lay out our Project 7,000 in a couple more weeks. The other thing I ask you to do, and if you're watching this in the archives, you can go to an interesting website, and I will put the link down in the heading on this, but it's called Islam and Christianity, the Quran versus the Bible. Did you guys read this? This was the first time, I would say, is in reading through some of this, it's the first time I have read that much of the Quran before. How about you? Anybody here read the Quran? Anybody here read the Quran? No. Okay, I hadn't either. And so this lays it out in such a way that it's just powerful. You can find it at Dianedew, that's the word Diane, DIANEDEW.com, and /Islam. And this is just an incredible tool to be able to look at it deeper. The other piece that we would be happy to send anybody is a man in our church is collecting his study on Islam. He's been doing a lot of reading, and he's been writing it down in a summary form for us. So this is the first part. You can look at it and see what he was telling us about the history. So I'm going to start with this. We're going to go through some of those things, and I'm going to give you first just a little quiz to see if we understand the vocabulary words related to Islam. So I'm going to give you the word, and you tell me what it means. Okay? You tell me what it means. First word is Islam. What does the word Islam mean? Anybody know?
The belief in Allah and the Prophet Muhammad.
Okay, that's close. You're giving me the meaning of the system of Islam, but did you know the word Islam means submission? Okay, you need to understand that, because really you cannot understand this whole concept of Islam until you know the word itself. If you translate the word Islam into English, our closest word is submission. Submission. Okay, submission. So Islam we know as being a religious system based on submission to whom? Allah, that is the God of Islam, and there is a central prophet. His name is Muhammad. Okay, so those were the first 3 words. Islam, Muhammad, and Allah. What is a Muslim? Some people say the word Muslim. You can hear both pronunciations in English, Muslim and Muslim. What is a Muslim or Muslim?
Follower of Islam.
A follower of Islam. So Islam is the religion. Sometimes we use the word Islamic. Sometimes you're going to hear this in the modern news right now, this word Islamist. I'm going to help you to understand that later, because right now it's like we're throwing all these vocabulary words around, and I finally had to look and say, okay, what are we talking about here? Because we have Muslims who are Islamic, or we have Muslims who are Islamist. And somehow people are trying to differentiate that, okay? With the Quran. How do you spell the word Quran? Quran or Koran. You will see it written both ways in English, because of course the dominant language that the Islamic religion will be based on is
Arabic?
Arabic. Okay. It's going to be based on another religion, so a whole different alphabet system. So that's important to realize, because the Quran is written in another language, and then it has been translated into English. Although, if you were in a mosque, what is a mosque?
Place of worship for
Muslims. Muslims' house of worship is called a mosque. Okay? If you went to a mosque in America, then you may very well go into a system where no one will be speaking in English. The Quran may be read in Arabic. There are many, many Muslims who have never read the Quran. That's interesting to note, okay? Because many Muslims consider the English translation of the Quran to be somewhat polluted or not accurate. So in the same way that we have a tradition back in Judaism, or even in early Christianity, where people were going to, remember the Reformation, where people were going to church and they were reading the Bible, only it was read in a language of Latin of which nobody was speaking anymore. That became a problem, correct? In some ways, we have a lot of that going on here too, where people, we think, oh, well, everybody's read the Quran and they've memorized it. Maybe, maybe not, okay? All right,
so
here's
a lot
another
of
one.
Christians still haven't read the entire Bible.
A lot of people haven't read the Bible, okay? So let's go through some of these words and then we're going to talk about some of those issues. Okay, here's another word, imam, I-M-A-M. Who knows what that means? These are words you need to know, by the way. So I'd write these down if you don't have a working knowledge of these. You know what that is? That is a leader in the Islamic faith. So in the news in the last few weeks, you've seen imam, imam from maybe England or Great Britain, or imam from London, or the imam from, and name a city or a region. An imam in our way of thinking would be a pastor or a leader, only they do not have pastors or leaders in the Islamic faith. In other words, they're not really given the job of shepherding over the people. They're simply the ones who are to lead at that particular location the prayer and the recitation. So it's not like they're pastors like we think of the sense, but they do have some voice. So if you wanted to call down to the mosque here in Carbondale, then you might want, the way you would probably do that is, hi, could I speak to the leader or the imam or whoever the person is, and they would be the one you talk to. Okay? So it's a good word to know. Sharia law or Sharia law. Who knows what that is?
It's like a government law system that they live by.
Okay, remember the word Islam means submission. The Islamic faith has a system of law to it that is the goal of the Islamic faith is that all would be in subjection to who? Allah. So they have a system of law that goes with the system of Islam that is working to support their principles of justice and their principles of submission to Allah through the system of Islam. Yes?
Is that kind of like their system of, quote, moral absolutes?
That is their system of morality, and that is their system of justice. It's both. Now, I want to warn you, we're over in a zone where we're trying to understand Islam with a Western mind. Islam is from an Eastern mind set, and so we're trying to think and put things in boxes that don't neatly go into boxes, and that's really tripping us up in understanding the whole system of Islam. The system of Islam is based on the Prophet Muhammad's writings, which were preserved in the Quran, which lead people to subjection to Allah. The system of Sharia law is the system that goes along not only in the Quran, but in another book or another set of writings called the Hadiths. Hadith, the Hadiths. The Hadiths are not as, they're not quite as elevated as the Quran, but they're considered authoritative. And so you have these writings that are from when? When did Muhammad write, or when did Muhammad live? It's right here in your handout. When did he live? Who has that date in there? Can you find it in here? Over to the third page. The early life of Muhammad. He was born in Mecca, in what is now Saudi Arabia. Okay, you understand, getting our geography right. In the now Saudi Arabia, around 570 AD. Okay? 570 AD, when was that? Correlate now what was going on in the world, 570 AD. Just in generalities. You don't have to be an expert in this, just give me the generalities. Okay, what's going on in the church?
After the fall of Rome, right?
Yes. Okay,
Church
you've got
hasn't started yet.
the church, yes, the church. Remember now, Jesus is roughly 33, okay? His crucifixion and then the establishment of the church happens in that 1st century AD. Remember now, the first 100 years, you've got the life of Jesus, and then you've got the beginning of the birth of the church. In around 300, and these are how I remember it in broad terms. This is something we need to, do more of, and that's to study our history and know these. But in around 300, you had the time when Constantine became the leader, and he began to say that Christianity would be married in to being the religion of the state. Remember that in Constantine in early 300s. So now we're at 570. Okay, so we're 200 years after Constantine. This is before the Middle Ages. This is way 1,000 years before the Reformation. So we're still talking in the early years of the church, but clearly the church is now alive, correct? So the writings were coming after, now understand though, the writings of the Quran came after the Old and the New Testament would have been written. Obviously the Old Testament was in writing way before that, and the New Testament was already written and canonized. So the scripture was intact by then. That's very important to understand, because you're going to find in the book of the Quran that he borrowed many teachings from the Bible, and that was already laid out. Okay? All right. So let's get through our rest of our words here. What does the word jihad mean? We hear that in the news a lot. What is jihad?
Holy war.
Holy war, or violence toward the next word, infidel. What is an infidel?
Non-believer in Islam.
A non-believer in Islam. Okay? Infidel is INFEDFIDEL. Now, if you look at the whole system of Islam and the Islamic thought process of when they look at their world, they believe that all of the world is divided into 2 houses. The house of peace and the house of war. The house of peace is Dar al-Islam, and the house of war is Dar al-Harb. Now, I may be saying these words wrong because I'm not very good with my pronunciation on this. The house of peace are those who are now Islamic, who are in subjection to Allah. Uh-oh. What are they calling everybody else? We're in the house of war. That's how they divide the world. Can you immediately see where some of these foundational issues are coming to play? So you have a whole worldview system that is divided between the concept of the house of peace and the house of war. Okay, now, I want to help you to understand some things about Islam in the modern world today. In just a moment, we're going to go back and we're going to look at the life of Muhammad. Because if you're trying to understand a belief system, there's 2 main ways that you can understand a belief system. The first I would propose to you is looking at the founder of the belief system and what their life revealed about the origins of the system. Does that make sense? If somebody wrote a book, you want to go and find out who the author is. If somebody founded a religion, you want to say, what did they found it on, and what clues can we get about their views based